Hello everyone. In this video I will explain to you how you can solve quadratic equations. I will explain both how you can solve them using the cover-up or balance method, which works for some equations, and I will explain how you can solve it using factorising, which works for some others. Do be aware it will be quite a long video, so do use the timestamps in the description, and I will skip over the actual factorising part, so if you're not sure why I factorized it the way I did, pause the video and see if you can solve it for yourself. So, solving quadratic equations, the first step you should always take is see if you can somehow rearrange it to something squared equals a number. Because if this is the case, you can just use the cover-up method to solve the equation. This method works when there is only something squared and a number in the formula. If there is a regular x that is not squared, then this method will not work and you can go straight to the next step. Let's look through some examples for this. The easiest one is just this: x squared equals 7. Now you can just use the cover-up method, covering x, to see that x equals square root 7 or x equals minus square root 7. You could also say that you're using the balance method, because you're taking the square roots on both sides, but you have to remember that there are two answers. Of course, we can make this a bit more difficult. It doesn't have to be x that is squared. It can also be 2x plus 5 that is squared. And here as well, we can use the cover-up or balance method to find that 2x plus 5 is the square root of 25, so 5 or minus 5. And then we just have two linear equations we have to solve. If 2x plus 5 is 5, then 2x is 0. If 2x plus 5 is minus 5, then 2x is minus 10. And from this we can conclude that x is 0 or x is minus 5 by dividing by 2 on both sides. Final example, because we can make it even more difficult, looks like this. We still have only something squared, only now is multiplied by something, and we have numbers. So we can still use this method. First thing we have to do is rearrange, so we only have something squared equals a number. So we first do plus 4. Then we're still not there because we still have that 2. So we also divide by 2 to get 3x plus 1 squared equals 16. And now we're back to the previous example. We use the cover-up method or the balance method to see that 3x plus 1 equals 4 or 3x plus 1 equals minus 4. Then we do minus 1 on both sides to get 3x is 3 or 3x is minus 5. And finally we divide by 3 to see that x is 1 or x is minus 1 2/3. So these are just 3 examples where you rearrange something squared equals a number. If this doesn't work, and only if this doesn't work, we continue with the next step, which is to rearrange to something equals 0. Once we have something equals 0, we factorize this. If we have a binomial, so something with an x squared and with an x, it's going to look like something x times something x plus something. Lots of somethings we still have to fill in. If it's a trinomial, so an x squared, an x, and a number, then we get this shape with two sets of brackets. After we factorize it, we can use the system that a times b equals 0 implies that a equals 0 or b equals 0. And in both of these cases, we have a times b or a times b equals 0. So one of these parts has to be 0. Let's again look at some examples. First of a binomial, we only have two terms, one with x squared and one with x. So we have a binomial on our hands. To factorize, we see what the largest factor is we can take out. In this case, that's 2x. So we get 2x times 4x minus 3 equals 0. Using that final rule, we get that 2x equals 0 or 4x minus 3 equals 0. Then it's simply a matter of solving this. X equals 0 or 4x equals 3. We use the balance method here. And finally, dividing by 4 for the second equation. X equals 0 or x equals 0.75. Let's also see an example of a trinomial. This one, x squared minus 6x minus 16 equals 0. In this case, we use the sum product rule to factorize this. And we get x minus 8 times x plus 2 equals 0. Again, using that a times b rule, that means that x minus 8 is 0 or x plus 2 is 0. And using the balance method, we find that x equals 8 or x equals minus 2. Now these two examples are quite straightforward. You just get the formula, you factorize, and you're done. But there can also be more difficult examples, so let's walk through two of those difficult examples as well. The first one is this. 3x squared plus 36 equals 21x. In this case, we haven't rearranged to 0 yet, so that is our first step. We do minus 21x on both sides, so we have rearranged to 0. But we have another problem. Our sum product rule only works if we have x squared and not 3x squared. So we need to use the balance method again. This time to divide by 3, because if we divide by 3, we end up with not 3x squared, but just x squared. And we need to do those preliminary steps to get an equation that we can factorize. This can be factorized with the sum product rule to get x minus 4 times x minus 3 equals 0. From this we can conclude that x minus 4 equals 0 or x minus 3 equals 0, which means, with the balance or cover-up method, that x equals 4 or x equals 3. Another very tricky one may look like this. X plus 5 times x plus 3 equals 3. This formula is already factorized, but it is not equals 0, so we can't use the a times b rule. What we actually have to do is expand the brackets, get rid of those brackets first. That gives us x squared plus 8x plus 15 equals 3. And now we can rearrange to 0. So we get x squared plus 8x plus 12 equals 0. Then we have to factorize it again. This time we have x plus 6 times x plus 2 equals 0. And then we can finish solving this equation, because we can say that x plus 6 equals 0 or x plus 2 equals 0, which finally means that x equals minus 6 or x equals minus 2. So let's summarize, and we will also look at the general formula of a quadratic equation to see when each version applies. ax squared plus bx plus c. So the first step is always to see if you can somehow rearrange it to something squared equals a number. This only works if we only have something squared and a number. So no bx term, no term with just x. In this case, you can just use the cover-up method to solve the equation, as long as you remember that there are 99% of the time 2 possible answers. If this doesn't work, if there is a bx term, then you rearrange to 0. After that, you factorize the results. It will either be a binomial or a trinomial. A binomial is if there's no c, if there's only an x squared term, or an x term, and an x term. In a trinomial, you have all 3 terms, but we do have the additional rule that a has to be 1, because otherwise our sum product rule doesn't work, and then it is a lot more difficult to factorize the result. Also, for the trinomial, it will not work for all numbers. Especially, it will not work if they are not whole numbers, because then it is too difficult to find the proper numbers. And even with whole numbers, there are sometimes numbers where we just can't find a solution to factorize it. So be aware that that is possible. Finally, if we have factorized it, then we solve the equation using the fact that a times b equals 0 implies that a equals 0 or b equals 0. This leaves you with a linear equation, which we have also already learned how to solve. So this is the summary of how to solve quadratic equations. Good luck solving your equations.